Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another question of the week. This time asked by Dimmest Lounge 12. What happened with all of the Gundam Mark II units? Or, in other words, what was their fate? So, let's go all the way back to the beginning. Officially, 3 Gundam Mark II units were made and were assigned to 3 Titans pilots for testing. Jared Mesa, Kakarot Cooler, and Emma Sheen. Although 2 of them wouldn't be using these Gundams for too long. But first, let's talk about who was assigned to which unit, because I think there's something funny here that I haven't really seen anyone talk about. So people will typically say that Emma was assigned to Unit 1, Kakarot to Unit 2, and Jared to Unit 3. Because for the very simple reason that for all 3, we have anime proof. Jared is seen crashing Unit 3 into a building, Kakarot got his Unit 2 stolen by the AEUG, and in later episodes, we see Emma piloting Unit 1. But what about the first appearance of Unit 1? It's out on a test flight, but we don't actually see who the pilot is. And when this anonymous pilot sees Quattro on his reconnaissance mission, this pilot immediately and aggressively engages.
Using a Vulcan inside his own colony? Doesn't he care about this place?
Personally, I feel that this is more of a Jared or a Kakarot thing to do, but they had their own Gundams, so for Emma's sake, I hope that there was a 4th test pilot who was using the Gundam Mark II at that time. And this is kinda backed up by the fact that a little bit later, Emma is seen running around without a mobile suit. So then, shortly after we see Unit 1's test flight, we see Jared testing out Unit 3 by crashing it into a building, and right at that moment, the AEUG breaks into the colony to steal those Gundams. In response, Jared runs off to try to find another mobile suit to fight back, and Bright and Emma try to get Unit 3 back up and running to get that thing into the fight against the AEUG. But just when they're about to reactivate it, and Emma is about to board it, Kamille steals it and immediately defects to the AEUG. And as all of this was happening, Kakarot was out there in Unit 2 fighting against the AEUG. But when he was cornered, he surrendered his unit to the AEUG as well, giving the AEUG 2 units and leaving the Titans with only 1 unit, being Unit 1. Which was then either already assigned to Emma, or she got assigned to it later on. After some back and forth though, Emma decides to defect to the AEUG, now giving them all 3 units. Except for the fact that there might have been more than those 3 units, because in the new translation movie trilogy, we see that the Titans still had 2 Gundam Mark IIs left, after 2 got stolen. And this is also reflected in the sticker sheet of the Master Grade Gundam Mark II Titans Color version 2.0 HD color version. We don't just get the markings for Unit 1, 2, and 3, but also for Unit 4. Now, we don't know anything about this Unit 4, but I believe that it makes the most sense that for the remainder of the war, it was mainly used as like a test unit or a data gathering unit, with that data then being used for the Barzam and the refined Barzam, along with all the data gathered by other units like the Titans test team and whatnot. However, I did find one book that claims that Unit 4 was badly damaged when it crashed during a high-speed maneuvering test. So you can decide for yourself if Unit 4 was FUBAR and was then just going to serve as spare parts for the Mark II that they still had, or if they repaired it and then use it for other things, which is what I'm going to go with in the rest of this video. But back to those 3 units stolen by the AEUG then. With all three secured, the AEUG wasted no time in repainting Unit 3 in the more heroic white, blue, and red color scheme. And this particular machine would then become one of their main mobile suits. And this machine would be piloted by many of the AEUG's top aces, but the two main pilots, at least during the Grips War, were Kamille, then followed by Sheen, once Kamille switched over to the more powerful Zeta Gundam. And this particular Gundam Mk-II would also get two upgrade modules during the war. The first was the Flying Armor. This was essentially a hoverboard that allowed the Gundam Mk-II to go through atmospheric re-entry, and then once on Earth, it could act as a sub-flight system. It performed exactly as the AEUG had hoped, and definitely gave the Mk-II a real edge in combat, especially during atmospheric descent operations. But unfortunately, it would be lost during the single battle that it was deployed in, and it seems that no more were made. The second upgrade then would see a lot more use, the G-Defensor. So this was a heavy support fighter that could dock with the Gundam Mk-II's backpack, which then also led to the Mk-II being called the Super Gundam. And the reason for this combination was that with the Titans fielding ever more powerful mobile suits, the Mk-II was slowly but surely falling behind the curve. So to fix this, the G-Defensor was developed to incorporate both powerful weapons, being missiles and a beam cannon, as well as powerful thrusters, which improved the Mk-II's mobility by about 20%. And this then gave the Mk-II the boost that it really needed to stay relevant up until the end of the Grips War, when the G-Defensor was unfortunately lost in combat. Although more would be made, but just not assigned to the Mk-II anymore. As for the other Gundam Mk-II units, meanwhile, Unit 2 was disassembled to serve as spare parts, and Unit 1 was shipped off to Anaheim for testing, where famous pilots like Jack Bayard and Asuna Elmerit would then be involved in its testing. It is never officially mentioned what this testing would lead to, but I have no doubt that it led to things like the aforementioned G-Defensor and perhaps even the later GIM 3, which could also use the G-Defensor. So let's recap then. At the end of the Grips War, Unit 3 was and is still seeing active duty with the AEUG, with spare parts being provided by Unit 2. Unit 1 is being tested out at Anaheim, and Unit 4 is doing things for the Titans, and probably got repossessed by the Federation at the end of the war. Throughout the following war then, the first Neo Zeon War, we only really get information about what happened to the Gundam Mk-II that was being used by the AEUG, so Unit 1. Just as during the Grips War, it would be used by a variety of pilots, but the main pilot would eventually be Elviano. Unfortunately though, throughout the first Neo Zeon War, funding was extremely scarce, so the Gundam Mk-II never got any further updates. It didn't even get its old updates back, again, even though there were G-Defenders out there. Still, even without being upgraded and just being in its stock configuration, the Mk-II again fought throughout the entire war and actually managed to survive it. Sure, it was damaged, but they were able to fix it up again and was then put into storage by the Federation. Which I believe is then also basically the fate shared by the other Gundam Mk-IIs. By this time, they surely must have gotten all of the data out of it that they could have gotten out of it, so in my headcanon, Anaheim also put their unit into storage, and the one that the Titans had, which now probably belongs to the Federation, was most likely also put into storage by the Federation. So, at the end of the first Neo Zeon War, we know that one Gundam Mk-II is definitely still alive and in storage, with potentially two more being alive, and also being in storage. And this is important because in the next few years, we suddenly see more Gundam Mk-IIs popping up from somewhere. First, around the UC 0090s, Yazon, who now goes by the name Vasky, is again part of the Federation forces. And to keep a very long story very short, he is being supported by Gop, who is now a high-ranking official in the Federation government. And one of the ways that Gop supported this Vasky fellow was by using his influence to give him a Gundam Mk-II after his own mobile suit got badly damaged. And considering the fact that Gop belongs to the Earth Federation government, I would assume that this Gundam Mk-II is one of the Gundam Mk-IIs that the Federation had in their direct storage. And I really like to imagine that this is that Unit 4 that the Titans used to have because, you know, Yazon/Vasky is an ex-Titan member. And it also goes well with the backstory of our next mysterious Mk-II, which appears a couple of years later. And this customized Gundam Mk-II is piloted by Banagher. For the most part, it is a stock Gundam Mk-II, but the right arm has been modified with a Dovin Wolf arm in Banagher's never-ending quest to keep using the Beam Magnum despite not having the Unicorn Gundam anymore. And the author of the manga that this thing appears in has hinted at the fact that this Gundam Mk-II might have been used by the AEUG, so Unit 1. And that is where we stand at the current fate of the Gundam Mk-IIs. Unit 1 became a testbed for Anaheim, whose data was most likely used for units like the Gym 3, and is then possibly held in storage by Anaheim. Unit 2 became spare parts, meaning that in some way it is living on through Unit 3. Unit 3 then became the most famous unit, surviving on the front lines of both the Grips War and the first Neo Zeon War, and would then be put into combat again after being customized for Banagher. And then finally the mysterious Unit 4 was used by the Titans, and then probably repossessed by the Federation, after which it was given to Yazon/Vasky. Again, potentially. Or, if you want to go with the theory that Unit 4 was Fubar, then the unit that Yazon was using was Unit 1. So, despite sometimes being derided as one of the weaker Gundams out there, like, they literally refused to die, and they just kept on going. In part thanks to their performance, but also in part thanks to their excellent serviceability and repairability, because on numerous occasions they got really banged up, but they got back into combat relatively quickly. So if that isn't a testament to how amazing these units are, I don't know what is. But that has been all for this question of the week. Let me know what you think about it down below, and if you have a question you'd like answered in a future question of the week, you can also leave that down below. As always, a big thank you to the Patreon supporters. I hope everyone watching has a great day, and I'll see you all next time.